On the 4th of July, America's Independence Day, smoke billowed from the BBQ grills throughout the sprawling backyard. Music thumped in the air. The cheerful laughter and conversation of neighbors echoed all around. My son, Sterling, stood in front of me. A little sauce had stained his expensive designer suit. His face was flushed red from alcohol and overwhelming greed. He wanted me to sign a document surrendering my rights to the family insurance benefits. He needed that money to save his cryptocurrency project, which was on the verge of collapse. I shook my head and refused. That refusal awakened the monster inside him. He jabbed his finger into my chest 13 times. He called me a parasite while his wife stood there filming and laughing at me. They had no idea that I was the owner of the land they were standing on. Welcome back to Dad's real-life revenge. Grab a drink, some snacks, get comfortable, and remember this. The people in these stories had every opportunity to do the right thing. They simply chose not to. Leave a comment with the number 1 so we can continue the story and hit subscribe. You're going to enjoy this one. My name is Garrick, 65 years old. I spent my entire life in business. I laid one brick at a time to build a solid life. But I failed in one place. The character of my son, Sterling. He always believed he could build an empire by stepping on his own father. Just because I refused to sign that document just because of money, he was willing to back me into the corner of the wooden balcony. He did not use a weapon. He used his index finger. He drove it hard into my chest. 1 jab, 2 jabs, 3 jabs. Every jab came with a bitter insult. He called me a senile old man. A parasite clinging to his success. 4 jabs, 5 jabs, 6 jabs. The force was so strong that I could feel pain shooting through my breastbone. On the 13th jab, he roared in my face. "You are nothing without my money." Right beside him, Amberly, his wife, held up the newest iPhone. She turned on the camera. The red recording light captured every humiliating moment. She did not stop him. She mocked me, a chilling, satisfied laugh. She treated me like a source of entertainment. Every jab was a domino falling into place. The 13th jab was the final one that made me decide to erase his world. As Sterling and Amberly's luxury SUV rolled out of the driveway, I stood alone in the darkness of the front porch. My hand gently brushed the bruise that was beginning to appear on my chest. The physical pain was nothing compared to the cold emptiness in my heart. Like, it was time to bring down the velvet curtain, hiding the so-called successful empire my son was so proud of. It was time to show them the true consequences of arrogance. People looked at Sterling as a successful young businessman. He owned a beautiful house. He drove luxury cars. He had a fashionable wife draped in designer brands. But as someone who had worked with numbers his entire life, I knew the ugly financial and moral reality he was trying to hide. Sterling's credit score was disastrously poor. No bank in this city would even consider his loan applications. The 4-bedroom house with the large swimming pool where they lived was nothing more than a trap of self-satisfaction. I had purchased it entirely with cash through an LLC that I quietly established to protect his future. For the past 5 years, Sterling had been busy posting photos on social media showing off his luxurious lifestyle. But it was my bank account that automatically paid the bills every month. I quietly covered the property taxes. I paid the homeowner's insurance. I even handled the smallest household expenses. I chose to remain silent. I chose to shield him because of the kindness and misguided indulgence of a father. I once hoped that one day he would mature and learn gratitude. But my kindness was not repaid with respect. It was repaid with 13 jabs to my chest and a malicious video mocking me online. My patience was completely gone. Their artificial glamour had been built entirely on my money. The moment I pulled that money away, their sandcastle would collapse instantly. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I stared at the banking app. My finger hovered over the command to deactivate the linked account. Sterling had no idea that the expensive suit he was wearing was about to make him a target for the most aggressive debt collectors in the city, and the most terrifying part for them would begin tomorrow morning. Before the sun even rose, I would make a phone call to officially set the purge in motion. I left the party in silence. I did not say a single word to anyone. I did not need to explain myself. I walked straight to my car and drove away into the darkness of the night. I went to my private office. The place was completely silent. Only the steady ticking of the clock could be heard. The anger inside me had vanished. In its place was a chilling calmness. I was no longer a grieving father crushed by his son's ingratitude. I was a machine of consequences. I turned on the desk lamp. I opened the fingerprint-secured cabinet drawer. I took out the original property documents for the house where Sterling and Amberly were living. Every legal ownership document was registered under my LLC. I turned each page one by one. The rustling of the paper sounded like a death sentence for their arrogance. I picked up my phone. I looked at the clock. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning. I sent an urgent message to an old acquaintance. He was the director of the largest asset liquidation company in the region. The message was very brief. I want to sell this property immediately. At 8 o'clock the following morning, I sat across from him in his office. I made a decision that any investor would call insane. I agreed to sell the house at a loss of 40% below its actual value. The only condition I gave was that the transaction had to be completed immediately. All legal procedures had to be finalized within 48 hours. My associate looked at me in astonishment. He asked whether I was certain. I simply nodded. I did not hesitate for a single second. I signed the property transfer documents. The sharp black ink stood out against the white paper. The contract was signed. The proceeds from the sale would be transferred directly into my restricted account. The asset liquidation company would take possession of the house just 2 days later. I stood up and shook my associate's hand. The purge had officially been declared. Sterling and Amberly were still sleeping peacefully in their warm bedroom. They had no idea that the roof over their heads no longer belonged to them. The 48-hour countdown had begun, and the next thing I would do would completely sever the lifeline of these parasites. I returned to my private apartment after night had fallen. I sat motionless in the darkness of my office. The only light came from the screen of my laptop. I logged into my primary banking account. This was where the entire system of automatic payments I had set up for Sterling's family over the years was managed. I began carrying out each action with absolute determination. First, I clicked on the vehicle financing section. I canceled the monthly payment for the luxury SUV that Amberly was driving. It was a vehicle registered in my name, yet she always proudly showed it off on social media. Next, I terminated their premium health insurance coverage. I removed the linked account used for their organic food delivery service. I canceled Sterling's membership in an exclusive wine club as well. Every click of my mouse felt like a cold, precise cut. I was stripping away each layer of luxury that I had provided for them. The most ridiculous detail appeared on the screen. It was the family postpaid phone plan. I looked at the network usage report. Amberly was using the high-speed data plan that I paid for to upload a video, humiliating me on the internet. She was using my money to tarnish my reputation. The irony was extraordinary. I was not angry. I simply smiled faintly. My fingers struck the delete key firmly. Their accounts were immediately isolated from my system. I closed the laptop. The room fell into complete silence. Every financial artery that had sustained their arrogance had been severed. They had become accustomed to living off me like proud parasites. Now the source of nourishment was gone. Sterling and Amberly still had no idea what was happening. They believed tomorrow would be just another ordinary day filled with parties and displays of wealth. All of these disruptions would hit at once. The expensive suit Sterling was wearing was about to witness the most humiliating spectacle of his life. But before that storm arrived, he had to experience humiliation in the place where he felt most confident. At noon on the second day, Sterling had arranged a meeting with 2 major investors at one of the most luxurious 5-star steakhouses downtown. He needed their capital to save his failing cryptocurrency investment fund. He chose the most exclusive VIP table. He ordered the most expensive dishes and the finest bottles of wine. He spoke endlessly about his promising million-dollar venture. The 2 investors nodded with approval. Sterling's self-satisfaction reached its peak. He believed victory was already in his hands. The meal came to an end. Sterling smiled confidently and waved for the waiter. He pulled a sleek black credit card from his wallet. He handed it over with the air of a wealthy gentleman. The waiter took the card to the payment terminal in the corner of the room. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes passed. The waiter returned with an apologetic expression. He lowered his head and quietly explained that the card had been declined. Sterling burst into laughter. He insisted there had to be a problem with the restaurant's payment system. He demanded that the card be run again. The terminal emitted a dry electronic beep. Declined again. Sterling's face immediately changed. The smile froze on his lips. The 2 investors exchanged suspicious glances. Sterling quickly pulled out a second card. He asked for a third attempt. The result was the same. Red letters appeared on the screen. Card declined. An oppressive silence settled over the five-star dining table. Beads of sweat began rolling down Sterling's forehead. He hurriedly pulled out his phone to check his bank accounts. But something even worse had happened. The screen displayed a message, no service. His phone had completely lost its signal. He could not make a call. He could not access the internet. He was completely cut off from the world. The two investors stood up. They looked at Sterling with absolute contempt. They said they had no time for a fraud who could not even pay for his own lunch. Then they walked away, leaving Sterling alone with the enormous bill. He was forced to use the small amount of cash remaining in his wallet and leave his wristwatch as collateral to settle the situation and escape the restaurant. Sterling stumbled out of the restaurant in a pitiful state. He desperately tried to contact Amberly, but what he did not know was that on the other side of the city, Amberly was enduring a similar nightmare. Their sandcastle was not merely shaking at the office, it was collapsing inside the very home they considered their sanctuary, and an even more devastating surprise was waiting for both of them when they returned home. While Sterling was being humiliated at the steakhouse, Amberly was also enjoying the final moments of her artificial luxury. She spent the entire morning at a five-star spa catering to the elite. She indulged in the most expensive skin and care treatments available. When it was time to pay, Amberly confidently handed over the credit card registered in my name. The employee ran the card once, declined a second time, declined again. Amberly immediately became furious and began shouting at the staff. She pulled out her phone to check her accounts, but the screen displayed only one message: no service. Her phone service had been completely disconnected. The spa manager stepped forward, accompanied by two large security guards. They informed her that she would need to provide another form of payment unless she wanted the police involved. With no cash and no phone, Amberly was forced to remove the expensive diamond bracelet from her wrist and leave it as collateral, suffering complete humiliation under the contemptuous stares of the wealthy women around her. She hailed a taxi and rushed home. At the same time, Sterling had just arrived on foot, looking disheveled and exhausted. The two of them froze in disbelief in front of the gate to the four-bedroom house. The sturdy iron gate had been secured with a massive black chain. In the middle of the beautifully landscaped yard sat a large industrial dumpster, the kind used at construction sites. Three armed security guards stood directly in front of the main entrance. They looked at the pair with cold, emotionless eyes. Sterling charged toward the gate in a panic, attempting to force it open. One of the guards stepped forward and blocked his path. The man informed him that the property had legally changed ownership. The entire estate had been liquidated. They no longer had the right to enter. Sterling screamed that it was his house. The guard produced a legal document bearing my signature and the seal of my LLC. He glanced at his watch and calmly announced that they had exactly 15 minutes to collect their essential belongings. Just 15 minutes to pack their entire luxurious lives into black garbage bags. Sterling and Amberly frantically stuffed designer clothes and expensive shoes into trash bags through tears and panic. Their pride had been completely shattered. But that was not the worst part. As they dragged the bags outside the gate, a shiny black pickup truck suddenly pulled up and stopped directly in front of them. The doors opened. Several hard-faced men stepped out. The real financial storm that would consume them was only now beginning to reveal itself. They were not bank employees. They were the real sharks of the underworld. Amberly stepped backward. Her face turned as pale as a corpse. Sterling stood trembling beside the pile of torn garbage bags. The tattooed man leading the group threw a stack of documents onto the pavement. It was a high-interest loan agreement, an underground loan totaling $80,000. Amberly had secretly borrowed the money months earlier. She had used it to buy designer handbags. She needed it to maintain the image of a wealthy socialite on social media. Sterling stared at his wife in shock. He had never known about the enormous debt, but the debt collectors had no time for his surprise. They moved forward and grabbed Sterling by the collar of his expensive suit. They forced him into their vehicle. They demanded that he go immediately to his investment company and withdraw money to repay the debt. Half an hour later, the vehicle stopped in front of a luxurious glass office building. This was where Sterling worked. The collectors dragged him straight into the company lobby. Dozens of employees were present. The men began overturning furniture and causing a disturbance. The leader loudly announced the existence of the $80,000 debt. He exposed the entire fraudulent image that Sterling and Amberly had created. Pointing directly at Sterling, he called him a pathetic fraud living on borrowed money. The mask of the successful businessman shattered right there on the lobby floor. Every co-worker looked at him with complete contempt. The company's chief executive officer stepped out of a conference room. He took one look at the chaos with visible anger. He did not need to hear a single explanation from Sterling. Bringing criminal debt collectors into the workplace was in his eyes the most serious professional violation imaginable. He coldly pointed toward the door. Sterling was fired immediately. He was thrown out onto the street in utter humiliation. The career he had been so proud of vanished within a matter of minutes. The debt collectors eventually climbed back into their vehicle and left. Before departing, they delivered one final threat. If the money was not paid within a few days, they would come back for him. Sterling collapsed onto the cold sidewalk. Now he had no home, he had no money, he had no job. The next domino had fallen completely. He had been pushed into a corner of absolute desperation, but it was that very desperation that would drive him to commit the most reckless act of his life. One final move that would lead him directly into the bear trap I had already prepared. If you followed the story all the way to this point, then perhaps you found it interesting. Please help us with one quick favor. Like and subscribe. Leave a comment with the number 5 so I know you've made it this far, and tell me what you think the final outcome of the story will be. Let's see if your prediction is correct. Many people watch without doing so, but it costs you nothing and means a great deal to us. Sterling and Amberly had fallen into complete desperation. The debt collectors continued sending ruthless threats. They saw no way out. Greed and resentment clouded my son's judgment. He decided to commit a reckless act. He would break into my cabin on the outskirts of town and steal money. He knew I had always kept a substantial amount of cash in the family safe. That night, the sky was pitch black. A cold drizzle hung over the landscape. Sterling, dressed entirely in black, and quietly approached my property through the back entrance. Hidden inside his jacket was a dangerous weapon, a cold metal set of brass knuckles. He had brought it with him, prepared to use violence if I discovered him. He was willing to raise his hand against the very father who had raised him. Sterling used a small pry bar to force open the door latch. A soft click echoed through the silent darkness. He slipped inside like an experienced burglar. The house was completely empty and eerily quiet. There was no sign of anyone, no sound except his own rapid, frantic breathing. He switched on a small flashlight and headed straight toward my office, the room where the wall safe was located. He found the safe. His hands trembled as he entered the old code. He remembered the safe door swung open, but there was not a single dollar inside. The safe was completely empty. Only a single sheet of white paper rested alone in the center. Sterling picked it up. There was only one sentence written on it in my handwriting. "I am watching you." A chill ran through his entire body. At that exact moment, a faint electronic beep sounded. From a dark corner of the room, a red light began flashing. It was a state-of-the-art security camera system. It was recording everything live and transmitting the footage directly to my cloud storage. At the same moment, the deadly silence of the house was shattered. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights swept across the windows, illuminating Sterling's face. I had prepared the perfect bear trap. I had reported an armed home invasion to the police before he had ever set foot on the property. Sterling stood frozen in absolute shock. He realized he had walked directly into the trap. The thunder of approaching footsteps echoed through the main hall as officers entered the house. The atmosphere inside the county courthouse was heavy and solemn. I sat in the section reserved for victims. My face showed no emotion. I looked toward the defendant's stand. Sterling was standing there. The arrogance he once carried had completely vanished. In its place was a loose-fitting orange prison uniform. His hands were locked in metal handcuffs. Every movement produced the rattling sound of chains clinking together. Amberly sat in the row behind him. Her face was gaunt and completely devoid of makeup. The judge instructed the court clerk to present the decisive evidence. The large screen in the center of the courtroom flickered to life. It was the video downloaded from my cloud storage. The footage showed the entire scene from the 4th of July barbecue party. The audio echoed clearly throughout the courtroom. Sterling's furious shouting, the sound of his index finger jabbing into my chest 13 consecutive times, his voice calling me a worthless old parasite. And most disturbing of all was Amberly's satisfied laughter ringing out from the recording. The phone camera she held with its blinking red recording light had captured the evidence against her own husband. The entire jury was shaken by the cruelty and disrespect displayed by the son. The prosecutor then presented the metal brass knuckles that Sterling had carried during the break-in at my home. It was undeniable evidence supporting the charges of armed burglary and conspiracy to commit assault. Sterling lowered his head. He could not utter a single word in his defense. The naked truth had been exposed for everyone to see. Justice was now prepared to deliver its harshest judgment. The judge struck the gavel against the bench. The sharp crack echoed throughout the courtroom. The court sentenced Sterling to 7 years in a maximum security correctional facility. Moments later, court officers approached Amberly from behind. The cold click of a second pair of handcuffs echoed through the room. Amberly was arrested on the spot. She faced charges of conspiracy and fraud related to the $80,000 underground loan. She broke down in desperate sobs as she was escorted away. Sterling looked up at me with a plea for mercy that had come far too late. But I simply turned away in chilling silence. Their darkest punishment had been completed. Their artificial world had officially been erased. I stepped out of the courthouse into the blazing sunlight. Yet my journey of revenge was not over. The final legacy I intended to leave behind would become the true crushing blow against their greed. I left the noisy city immediately after the trial. I moved into a small cabin deep in the mountains. Out there was nothing but the sound of wind passing through the pine trees and absolute peace. The rattling chains and orange prison uniform of Sterling had faded into the past. The bruise on my chest had completely healed. My soul had also found peace again after the storm. Before leaving, I carried out one final legal transaction. I went to my attorney's office to establish an irrevocable trust. I decided to donate all of the proceeds from the house sale along with the entire fortune I had accumulated over a lifetime worth millions of dollars. I transferred the money directly to the city's children's hospital. I wanted the fruits of my labor to be used to save innocent children. I did not leave a single cent to Sterling or Amberly. Their greed would receive nothing but an empty void for the rest of their lives. After their release from prison, they would have to earn their living through their own work and endure the consequences of poverty. My story is a clear reminder for anyone suffering injustice at the hands of their own family. Never allow anyone to trample your dignity. Do not confuse patience with weakness. I gave Sterling every opportunity to become a decent son, but he chose betrayal. I did not choose shouting or violence. I chose to use the law and the power of numbers to deliver justice. Always protect your self-respect in the face of humiliation. It has been a pleasure sharing this story with you here on Dad's Real Life Revenge. Join our community by hitting the like and subscribe buttons to enjoy more compelling and dramatic family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this community.